The pen touches paper. Laughter erupts around the table. Marcus Chen is signing away his empire, surrounded by bankers who orchestrated his fall. Then a waitress steps forward. That clause doesn't belong there. The room freezes. She spotted the fraud hidden in 73 pages. A trap designed to steal everything he owns. But who is she really? And why did she risk everything to speak up when silence was safer? Hey family, welcome to Life Stories. Please subscribe and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you so much for the support. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The pen hovered an inch above the paper. Marcus Chen's hand wouldn't stop shaking. Around the mahogany table, four men in tailored suits watched him with barely concealed amusement. The largest conference room at the Sterling Club had been chosen specifically for this moment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city Marcus once owned a piece of. Now he was about to sign away what remained. "Any day now, Marcus," David Brennan said, leaning back in his leather chair. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Unless you'd like to read through all 73 pages again?" The other bankers chuckled. Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck. His lawyer, Patterson, sat beside him with the expression of a man at a funeral. No words of encouragement, no last-minute strategies, just resignation. The terms are quite standard for bankruptcy proceedings, the lead attorney from Brennan's side said, adjusting his glasses. His tone suggested he was speaking to a child. Liquidation of assets, settlement of debts, dissolution of Chen Industries. Very straightforward. Marcus lifted the pen again. 27 years of building an empire, reduced to signatures on a document. His father's name was on that company. His daughter had taken her first steps in the old headquarters. "Sir, your water." A woman's voice, quiet and polite. Marcus glanced up briefly. The waitress stood beside the table, carafe in hand, refilling his glass. She was perhaps 30, hair pulled back severely, wearing the club's standard black and white uniform. He'd seen her moving around the room for the past hour, invisible to everyone but hyper-visible to him because she was the only person here who hadn't looked at him with contempt. "Thank you," he managed. She nodded and stepped back, but she didn't leave. Marcus noticed her eyes had drifted to the contract on the table. He looked back down at the signature line. Page 1 of 3 signature pages. He pressed the pen to paper. "Might want to hurry," Brennan said. "This offer expires at 5 o'clock. That's 20 minutes from now. After that, we withdraw the settlement and pursue criminal charges for the accounting irregularities." There it was. The threat that had brought Marcus here. Sign or go to prison. Cooperate or be destroyed completely. He'd spent 3 weeks with lawyers trying to find another way. There wasn't one. The fraud charges were fabricated, but they were fabricated expertly. Fighting them would cost millions he no longer had. Marcus signed the first page, then flipped to the second. "Smart man," Brennan said. "I always knew you'd land on your feet, or at least on your knees." More laughter. Patterson didn't even flinch. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. This was what defeat tasted like. Public, humiliating defeat. He signed the second page. "Last one," the attorney said cheerfully, as if they were closing on a vacation home. Marcus turned to the final signature page. His vision blurred slightly. Exhaustion, probably, or maybe tears he refused to let fall. He blinked hard and positioned the pen. "Sir." That same quiet voice. Closer now. Marcus looked up. The waitress had moved forward, and she was looking directly at him. Her expression was difficult to read, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made him pause. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. Her voice steady despite every face at the table turning toward her with irritation. "But that clause doesn't belong there." The room went absolutely silent. Brennan recovered first, his face darkening. "Excuse me? Who the hell are you two? Which clause?" Marcus heard himself ask. His voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. The waitress stepped closer to the table, still holding the carafe. She pointed with her free hand at a paragraph near the bottom of the final page. Section 12. Subsection D. It wasn't in the original bankruptcy filing you signed 3 weeks ago. Every lawyer in the room stiffened. Patterson leaned forward, suddenly alert. The lead attorney from Brennan's team started to speak, but the waitress continued. That subsection transfers your personal investment accounts to a holding company not listed in the bankruptcy proceedings. It's separate from the business assets. Marcus stared at the paragraph. The legal language was dense, intentionally obscure. But now that she'd pointed it out, he saw it. A clause that shouldn't exist. Patterson grabbed the document, his eyes scanning rapidly. "She's right," Patterson said slowly. His face had gone pale. "This isn't part of the court-approved bankruptcy terms." The room erupted. "That's absurd," Brennan snapped. But there was something off in his voice now, something uncertain. "Let me see that," the lead attorney demanded, reaching across the table. Patterson held the document away from him. "I have the original filing in my briefcase," Patterson said. "We can compare right now." Marcus watched as Brennan exchanged a quick glance with the man on his left. It lasted less than a second, but it told Marcus everything. They'd hoped he wouldn't notice. They'd counted on him being too broken, too desperate, too humiliated to read carefully. "This is ridiculous," Brennan said, standing abruptly. "Some waitress makes an accusation and you're willing to throw away your only chance at." "Sit down, David," Marcus said quietly. Something in his tone made Brennan pause. Marcus turned to look at the waitress, really look at her for the first time. She met his gaze calmly, without fear or apology. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Sarah Mills." "And how exactly did you know what was in my bankruptcy filing from 3 weeks ago, Ms. Mills?" A slight smile touched her lips. "I didn't, but I've been refilling water glasses in this room for 2 hours while you all discussed this deal. You said the terms were unchanged from the court filing. But when they brought out the final contract 30 minutes ago, I noticed they'd added stapled pages. Different paper weight, different printer. The formatting didn't match." Marcus felt his heart beginning to pound. Not with despair this time, but something else. Something that felt almost like hope. "So I read it while I was pouring coffee," Sarah continued. "The new clause transfers assets that aren't part of Chen Industries. That's not a standard bankruptcy provision. That's theft." Patterson was already pulling documents from his briefcase, spreading them across the table. Brennan's attorney tried to intervene, but Patterson brushed him aside. Marcus watched as his lawyer compared the documents line by line, his expression growing darker with each second. "She's absolutely right," Patterson said, his voice shaking with either anger or excitement. Marcus couldn't tell which. "This clause was added today. It's completely fraudulent." "Now wait just a minute," Brennan started. "You wait," Marcus said, standing now. Energy flooded back into his limbs. "You didn't just want my company. You wanted everything. My personal accounts, my daughter's trust fund, my mother's estate. Everything that should have been protected." Brennan's face had gone red. "This is a misunderstanding. Obviously, there was a clerical error. The clause specifically names holding companies that aren't public record," Sarah said quietly. "Someone did extensive research on Mr. Chen's private finances. That's not a clerical error. That's premeditated fraud." Marcus looked at her with something approaching awe. "Who are you really?" Before Sarah could answer, Patterson cut in. "Marcus, we need to contact the bankruptcy court immediately, and probably the FBI. This is criminal fraud. Attempted theft of protected assets. If you'd signed this, they could have drained every personal account you have before you even realized what happened." The other lawyers at the table had gone very quiet. Brennan stood frozen, calculating his next move. Marcus could practically see the man's mind racing through options, looking for an exit. "I think we should all stay right here," Marcus said calmly. "Ms. Mills, would you mind asking the club manager to come up and tell him to bring security?" Sarah nodded and walked to the phone on the sideboard. As she dialed, Marcus looked at the men who'd spent the afternoon mocking him, rushing him, pushing him toward ruin. They weren't laughing anymore. "You made one mistake, David," Marcus said softly. "You assumed I was alone." Brennan's eyes flicked to Patterson. "Your lawyer was." "Not Patterson," Marcus interrupted. "I didn't even know she existed an hour ago. But you made your mistake when you chose a public place for this. When you performed my humiliation in front of witnesses. You never considered that someone might actually be paying attention." He turned to look at Sarah, who was speaking quietly into the phone. She glanced back at him, and for a moment their eyes met. Marcus saw something in her expression then. Recognition of a shared experience. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated, to be invisible, to have people assume you didn't matter. The room fell into tense silence as they waited. Outside the windows, the sun was beginning to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Marcus Chen stood at the head of the conference table, and signed contract before him, and felt the balance of power shift like tectonic plates beneath his feet. If you're enjoying the story so far, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next. The club manager arrived within 3 minutes, security guard in tow. Marcus explained the situation in clear, precise terms while Patterson provided the legal documentation. Brennan attempted to leave twice. The security guard positioned himself in front of the door. "This is absurd," Brennan said, trying to regain his composure. "You're making wild accusations based on the observations of a waitress. No court will. Actually, courts take document fraud extremely seriously," Patterson said. He'd found his spine now, and his voice carried the authority Marcus remembered from better days. "Especially when it involves bankruptcy proceedings. That's a federal crime, Mr. Brennan. We're talking years in prison." "I want my lawyer," one of the other bankers said suddenly. He was younger than Brennan, and fear had broken through his professional facade. "Good idea," Marcus said. "You're all going to need excellent representation." Sarah had returned to her position near the wall, carafe still in hand, watching the scene unfold with quiet attention. Marcus caught her eye and gestured for her to approach. "Ms. Mills, I need to understand something. You said you read the contract while pouring coffee. That's what, 20 seconds? 30? And you caught a fraudulent clause hidden in 73 pages of legal language." Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I have a habit of reading things, anything in front of me, and I used to be a lawyer." The room shifted again. Everyone was staring at her now. "Used to be?" Patterson asked carefully. "I was a junior associate at Morrison & Fletcher. 8 years ago, I found irregularities in a client's acquisition documents. Reported them to my supervising partner. Turned out the irregularities were intentional, and the partner was receiving payments to overlook them." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What happened?" "I went to the ethics board. The client had connections. The partner had friends. I was accused of fabricating evidence to cover my own mistakes. I lost my license, my career, and most of my reputation." Sarah's voice remained steady, but Marcus heard the pain beneath it. "I've been doing whatever work I could find since then. Turns out the Sterling Club has excellent health insurance." Brennan laughed, the sound harsh and desperate. "So your key witness is a disbarred lawyer with a history of making false accusations? That's your case." "My witness is someone who noticed what you tried to hide," Marcus said. "And unlike 8 years ago, this time we have proof. Patterson has the original documents. We have witnesses to your attempts to rush me into signing. We have your reaction when you were caught." He stepped closer to Brennan, close enough to see the sweat beginning to form on the man's upper lip. "And most importantly, David, we have time now. Time to investigate properly. Time to look into every deal you've pushed through, every bankruptcy you've managed, every desperate person you've cornered in this room. How many others did you do this to? How many people signed without a Sarah Mills standing nearby?" Brennan's face went from red to white. Marcus saw the exact moment the man realized he was finished. The police arrived 20 minutes later, Patterson had called a friend at the district attorney's office who specialized in financial crimes. By the time the detectives walked into the conference room, Patterson had organized the evidence into a clear, damning presentation. Marcus gave his statement, then Patterson, then Sarah, who recounted everything she'd observed with perfect clarity, including direct quotes from conversations she'd overheard while appearing to simply do her job. "You have an excellent memory, Ms. Mills," one of the detectives noted. "Occupational habit," Sarah said with a slight smile. Brennan and his associates were escorted out separately. The younger banker was crying. Brennan maintained his composure until the handcuffs went on. Then he turned to Marcus with pure hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over," Brennan said. "Yes," Marcus replied calmly. "It really is." After they left, the conference room felt enormous and empty. Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. Patterson was on his phone, already coordinating with the bankruptcy court to halt the proceedings pending investigation. The club manager had apologized profusely and disappeared. Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the darkening city. Marcus walked over to join her. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Thank you," Marcus finally said. The words felt inadequate. Sarah turned to look at him. "You would have caught it eventually. Maybe not today, but when the money started disappearing." "Maybe," Marcus interrupted, "or maybe I would have been too broken to fight back. Maybe I would have assumed I deserved it somehow." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You saved more than my accounts today, Ms. Mills. You saved something I thought I'd already lost." "What's that?" "The belief that truth still matters. That someone might actually give a damn." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "I know what it's like to be in that room, surrounded by people who are certain you're powerless. I know what it feels like when they're wrong." Marcus nodded slowly. Outside, streetlights were beginning to flicker on across the city. His city, or at least it had been, might be again. "What you did 8 years ago," Marcus said. "Reporting the fraud. That was the right thing. It destroyed my life. It was still right." Marcus met her eyes. "And maybe this time, doing the right thing will mean something different. For both of us." Patterson approached, phone still pressed to his ear. He covered the mouthpiece. "The bankruptcy judge wants to see all the evidence first thing tomorrow morning. The DA is opening a criminal investigation into Brennan's other deals. Marcus, this changes everything. The bankruptcy might be dismissed entirely if we can prove it was built on fraudulent pressure." Marcus felt hope stirring, real hope, for the first time in months. But he didn't look away from Sarah. "I'm going to need help rebuilding. Not just the company. Everything. I need people around me who actually see what's in front of them. People who can't be bought or intimidated." He paused. "I'm going to need people I can trust." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Chen, I'm not looking for rescue. I've made my peace with how things are." "I'm not offering rescue," Marcus said. "I'm offering a job. Chief Compliance Officer when we get the company back. Someone whose entire purpose is to find the problems everyone else wants to ignore. Someone who reads the fine print while pouring coffee." A smile tugged at Sarah's lips. "That's a terrible job description." "It's an honest one." Sarah looked back out the window, considering. Marcus waited. He understood that she had no reason to trust powerful men making promises. He'd have to earn that trust if she even gave him the chance. "Can I think about it?" Sarah finally asked. "Take all the time you need," Marcus said. "But know this, whatever you decide, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did today. Morrison and Fletcher, the ethics board, everyone who wrote you off. They're going to know they were wrong about you." Sarah's eyes glistened slightly. "That won't bring back 8 years." "No," Marcus agreed. "But it might change the next 8. Patterson had finished his call and was gathering documents, already preparing for tomorrow's battles. The conference room that had been Marcus's execution ground 2 hours ago now felt like the site of something else entirely. Not a victory exactly, but a reprieve. A chance. Before you click away, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what you think Sarah should do. And subscribe because the aftermath of this story gets even more interesting. 3 weeks passed before Marcus and Sarah spoke again. The intervening days had been a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. Brennan had been charged with fraud, attempted theft, and conspiracy. 2 of his associates took plea deals almost immediately. The investigation expanded to include 6 other bankruptcies Brennan had managed over the past 4 years. In every case, hidden clauses had drained personal assets from desperate business owners who thought they were simply signing standard paperwork. The media loved the story. Disgraced billionaire saved by observant waitress. The narrative practically wrote itself. Marcus did 3 television interviews and refused 24 more. Every reporter wanted to paint him as either a victim or a fool. He was neither, but explaining that took more nuance than sound bites allowed. Sarah declined all interview requests. Marcus respected that. He knew something about wanting to disappear. The bankruptcy proceedings were suspended pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Chen Industries remained in a kind of legal limbo, but at least it wasn't being liquidated. Marcus's personal accounts, which would have been emptied within days of signing that contract, remained intact. Barely intact, legal fees were astronomical but intact. He asked Patterson to arrange a meeting with Sarah. No pressure, just coffee. She agreed, and they met at a small cafe far from the Sterling Club, far from anywhere Marcus might be recognized. Sarah arrived exactly on time, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. Without the waitress uniform, she looked younger, less guarded. They ordered coffee and sat by the window. "You look tired," Sarah said. Marcus laughed. 3 weeks of depositions and media circuses will do that. You look like you've been avoiding said circuses. I changed my phone number, Sarah admitted. Reporters can be persistent. I noticed you didn't take any interviews. Neither did you. Not many anyway. Marcus stirred his coffee absently. They wanted a story about a damsel saving a knight, or maybe a knight saving a damsel. They couldn't quite figure out which narrative fit better. I didn't feel like helping them decide. Sarah smiled slightly. The truth is usually more complicated than the narrative. Always. Marcus set down his spoon. I meant what I said at the Sterling Club. About the job offer. Chief Compliance Officer. I've had Patterson draw up a formal proposal. Salary, benefits, the full package. But I wanted to give you this first. He slid an envelope across the table. Sarah opened it, then looked up sharply. This is a recommendation letter. 3 of them, actually. 1 from me, 1 from Patterson, and 1 from Judge Morrison, who's handling the bankruptcy case. Each one details exactly what happened, your role in uncovering the fraud, and our professional assessment of your character and abilities. Patterson has contacts at several major firms who are looking for compliance experts. You don't need Chen Industries, Sarah. You could have your career back. Sarah stared at the letters. Her hands trembled slightly. Why would you do this? Because it's owed to you. Because 8 years ago you were right and they were wrong, and maybe these letters help balance that scale. Marcus leaned forward. You gave me my life back. The least I can do is offer you yours. For a long moment Sarah didn't speak. She touched the letters gently, like they might disappear. The compliance officer position, she finally said. Is that offer still open? Marcus nodded. Then I accept. Not because I need rescue, but because I think we might actually build something worth protecting. Marcus felt relief flood through him. We're going to have battles ahead. The company's damaged. It'll take years to rebuild properly. Good, Sarah said. Easy victories aren't very interesting anyway. They shook hands across the table, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose, direction. A sense that the future might contain something other than survival. 6 months later, Chen Industries emerged from bankruptcy protection. The criminal investigation had revealed enough malfeasance that the court agreed Marcus had been coerced under fraudulent pretenses. The company was restructured, scaled down, but intact. Marcus remained CEO. Sarah Mills became the youngest chief compliance officer in the company's history. Her first action was implementing a policy requiring multiple independent reviews of all contracts and financial documents. Her second was establishing a whistleblower protection program with teeth, backed by the board and enforceable through arbitration. "You're making enemies," Patterson warned during one board meeting. "Good," Sarah replied calmly. "People who are afraid of oversight usually have something to hide." Marcus watched her work with something approaching awe. She'd found her footing quickly, and she wielded her authority with precision. The woman who'd been invisible while pouring coffee was impossible to ignore now. Brennan went to trial in month 7. Marcus and Sarah both testified. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Brennan was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and received an 8-year sentence. His associates received lesser terms. Morrison and Fletcher, Sarah's old firm, quietly settled with 3 of the victims in the bankruptcy scheme rather than face their own civil liability. The day after the verdict, Marcus found a letter on his desk. It was from the State Bar Association. Sarah's license had been reinstated following a review of her original case. New evidence had emerged during Brennan's trial showing that the partner who'd accused her had himself been under investigation at the time. The ethics board had made an error. They were prepared to issue a formal apology. Marcus took the letter to Sarah's office. She read it twice, then set it down carefully on her desk. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Vindicated, angry, relieved, sad that it took 8 years and someone else's conviction to admit they were wrong. She looked up at him, grateful that at least they did. "You could go back to practicing law. Big firm, corner office, the whole thing." "I could," Sarah agreed. She gestured at her office, modest but comfortable, with windows overlooking the city. "Or I could stay here and build something that actually matters. Make sure what happened to both of us doesn't happen to someone else." Marcus smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." 1 year after the day in the Sterling Club, Marcus hosted a small celebration dinner. Not at any fancy restaurant or exclusive club, at a simple bistro near the office. The guest list was short. Patterson, a few board members who'd stood by him, and Sarah. Over dessert, Patterson raised his glass. To second chances. To Sarah, who saw what others missed. And to Marcus, who had the sense to listen. They drank to that. Marcus looked around the table at these people who'd become something more than colleagues. A team. Maybe even friends. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, broken and desperate, pen hovering over paper that would have destroyed him. "I want to say something," Marcus said. Everyone turned toward him. "A year ago, I was ready to sign my life away. I convinced myself I had no choice, no options, no power. I was wrong, but I didn't know it yet. I needed someone to show me." He looked at Sarah. "You didn't have to speak up. You could have stayed invisible, collected your paycheck, gone home. It would have been safer, easier. But you spoke anyway. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's who you are." Sarah's cheeks colored slightly. "I just pointed out a clause." "You did more than that," Marcus said firmly. "You reminded me that truth matters, that people matter, that sometimes the person who seems powerless is actually the strongest one in the room." He raised his glass higher. "To Sarah Mills, the woman who saved my life by reading the fine print." Everyone drank again. Sarah smiled, but Marcus could see the emotion in her eyes. Later, as the dinner ended and people said their goodbyes, Marcus and Sarah walked out together into the cool evening air. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, "for tonight, for everything." "Thank you for that day," Marcus replied, "for having the courage to speak when you could have stayed silent." Sarah looked up at the sky, at the stars just beginning to appear above the city lights. "You know what I've realized this year? Power isn't about status or money or titles. It's about choosing to act when action matters. It's about seeing what's true and saying it out loud, even when everyone tells you to be quiet." "Especially then," Marcus agreed. They stood together in companionable silence. Two people who'd been broken by systems designed to favor the powerful and silence the weak. Who'd found each other at the exact moment both needed, reminding that truth could still win. That justice, however delayed, still meant something. Do you ever think about it? Sarah asked. That moment when I spoke up? What would have happened if I'd stayed quiet? Every day, Marcus said honestly. And every day, I'm grateful you didn't. Sarah nodded. Me too. Above them, the city continued its endless motion. Lights blazed in office windows where other deals were being made, other contracts signed, other lives hanging in balance. Marcus thought about all the rooms where decisions happened, where power played its games. He thought about all the people standing at the edges of those rooms, invisible and underestimated. He hoped some of them were paying attention. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more incredible stories. Drop a comment telling us about a time you spoke up when others stayed silent. And hit that like button if this story moved you. Because stories like this matter. Truth matters. And sometimes the person pouring coffee is the most powerful one in the room.